The White House is now defending the comments the president made about Kim Jong Un.
In an interview yesterday, the president said that he would be honored to meet with the North Korean dictator under the right circumstances. But the White House said later that the conditions are not there.
Let's bring in Zeke Miller. He's a CBSN political contributor and a White House reporter for Time. And Zeke, you were in that briefing room yesterday when Sean Spicer tried to walk those comments back a bit. What did you make of the White House's explanation? He could have just answered no when that question was presented to him.
Yeah, I mean, they're very reluctant to admit that the president messed up, and that's clearly the case here. Saying you'd be honored to meet with somebody like Kim Jong Un doesn't really work. It doesn't really even accomplish the president's priorities. If you look at what the president has been trying to do for the last several months, it's been to ratchet up pressure on North Korea, to ratchet up pressure on China, to pressure North Korea to drop its nuclear missile program development there. It's almost like a verbal take from the president, and then it put Sean Spicer in a difficult spot. He had to argue that it's just diplomatic protocol. We have to say we're honored to meet another. He's a head of state. That doesn't really add up, and doesn't really track with everything the administration has done. But I think it's another sign of just how the tension within the White House to sort of defend everything the president says, even when he makes a mistake.
And this certainly isn't the first time that we've heard the president speak positively about authoritarian world leaders. Of course, there's Vladimir Putin. There's President Duterte from the Philippines. How is the White House explaining what certainly appears to be a pattern of praise for strongmen around the world?
Exactly. I mean, that's something that's become apparent in the last couple of weeks, particularly after the call with Turkish President Erdogan after their referendum a few weeks ago, which international monitors said was certainly suspect and would have increased his powers. And the president called and congratulated him the next day. What the White House's response is that the president was elected to office on the America First platform, and here he is sort of driving in a sort of looking very specifically at what is in America's national interest and excluding things like human rights. That is not a core national interest. So in the case of Duterte, in the case of Erdogan, he doesn't need it. He can praise them because he needs them to accomplish some other goal, even if they have terrible, brutal rights records in their home countries. When it comes to Kim Jong Un or Vladimir Putin, that makes a little bit less sense. It's a little inconsistent, and that just seems more along the lines of just Donald Trump, sort of the way Donald Trump views the world, and people who are strong leaders in his mind, should be praised as such.
Zeke, let me ask you, or let me express what a lot of Trump supporters have expressed to me on social media and when I meet them, that the press is nitpicking the president on every single thing that he says, unlike his opponent during the 2016 election, Hillary Clinton, who offered always a very measured, almost lawyerly response to everything that she was asked. It seemed as if she was very cautious about what she was expressing. Donald Trump, to his supporters, speaks from the heart. He's not a seasoned politician. He hasn't been in the swamp for all these years. And it's to be expected that sometimes he may say something diplomatically. He's honored to meet the head of another country, but he doesn't really mean that he's honored. He would be honored to meet with a brutal dictator like Kim Jong Un. How does the press see that argument when it's made? I'm sure it's made to you, too, by Trump supporters.
Oh, it's made to us by the White House as well, Vlad. I mean, that's sort of the double-edged sword of how Donald Trump came to the White House. We know exactly what he's thinking at all times. He tweets us, he tweets us, sort of his mindset at the moment. There's not a lot of suspense there. At the same time, every once in a while, he does go too far. He does, either says something incorrect, says something impolitic or undiplomatic, and that comes back to bite him. He's the first, politician, first president of the United States who has not served in the military or an elective office before. And if you try to, imagine the reaction if Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or George W. Bush had said they'd be honored to meet Kim Jong Un just that way, or had said or invited Duterte to the White House, it would have been a very after everything he's done, it would have been the uproar on both sides would have been all the greater. And in some ways, Donald Trump gets a little bit of a pass, certainly from his supporters on this issue, but also from the greater Washington, maybe even the global establishment, when they're just sort of shaking their heads. He doesn't really mean that. That's sort of a pass that most other presidents presidents and certainly most other politicians would never get. So he's in a way starting on first base when it comes on foreign policy, just because he's a novice.
Well, Zeke, let's talk a little domestic policy. Republicans still have no health care vote scheduled in the House, and the president took to Twitter earlier, and this is what he wrote. The reason for the plan negotiated between the Republicans and Democrats is that we need 60 votes in the Senate, which are not there. We either elect more Republican senators in 2018 or change the rules now to 51%. Our country needs a good shutdown in September to fix this mess. So certainly for the people who work for the federal government, there's no such thing as a good shutdown, I would think. But what do you suppose the president means by that?
I think he's, referring to something that, I'll use an Obama line here, where we heard the Obama administration and the president used 5-6 years ago the notion that the fever will break. If only we get through this crisis, the opposition will crumble. That never happened. Every time they had a crisis, it only emboldened them. I think what Donald Trump is sort of misreading a little bit of the history of that 2013 shutdown. Where there is a sense that maybe we could create some sort of crisis, and that will either force Democrats to back down, or that they're going to lose seats in 2018 in the Senate. That doesn't seem to track, and certainly that's not the message you want to send when you need to get Congress to pass a continuing resolution by Friday to keep the government running, but also you're trying to get health care done this week. It's a very odd messaging that does sort of raise more, it's not a consistent message that lawmakers on Capitol Hill are hearing from the White House, and they're certainly looking for consistency. So he's in a way shooting himself in the foot when he sort of distracts with talking about the shutdown.
All right, Zeke Miller of Time. Thank you so much, Zeke.
Thank you for having me.